You made a contribution electronically. So let me thank you for that. I cannot understate how important it is that we all step up to the plate and give whatever we can to support these US Senate seats here in Georgia. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We got some exciting folks here. My co-host Andrew Yang, former presidential candidate, is here with us. Our candidate, the fearless Reverend Raphael Warnock, is here. And then all of my sisters, my daughters, everybody from the WNBA, exciting, is here. We've got Nneka Ogumake, Sue Bird, and Angel McCautry live. And then we're going to have some other players come in via video. So we are super excited about this. We're going to keep to the 30 minutes or so, honor your schedule. Let me start by introducing Andrew and Reverend Warnock, and then they're going to have a conversation for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to bring in the players and we're going to talk with them about why they wanted to be engaged in politics at all. And if you're going to be involved in politics, why you would endorse this particular candidate. So I hope that works for all of you, because that's what we're doing. So let me start with Andrew. Andrew is a new friend for me, but he's a solid Democrat that we all love. He's a lawyer by training. He is an entrepreneur by profession and a philanthropist by desire. We are absolutely thrilled to have him and his family, Evelyn and the two boys, on the ground here in Georgia, knocking on doors every day. Then there's Reverend Warnock, our fearless leader, the senior pastor from Ebenezer Baptist Church. And I'm not going to tell you too much about him because I don't want to steal his thunder. But let's just say I've known this guy for almost 20 years and he's a bad brother. He's a bad brother. So, you know, Andrew is on the ground here in Atlanta, but he also does a little bit of work for CNN. So I'm going to make him prove those CNN journalistic interview chops right now. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Reverend, for being here. Thank you to everyone who's here who supported the campaign. This event's about you. And this event's about us getting behind this man, the next U.S. Senator from the great state of Georgia, Reverend Raphael Warnock. There's no one I can imagine that would be better suited to talk about civic engagement and activism as it relates to politics and your campaign in particular. You and I first met last year at your church where you had a food pantry. You were giving food out to people who are struggling. Now there are so many more people who are struggling because of the pandemic. So talk about your path from helping your spiritual community to now running for U.S. Senate.
Well, thank you so very much, Andrew. It's wonderful to be here with you today. I am so grateful to my friend Lisa Borders. She said that we've known each other nearly 20 years. She was 16 when we met, and I'm so grateful for her leadership in so many ways. And I appreciate the players who are on the call, Sue Bird and Nneka and Angel. Thank you all so very much. And I appreciate for the ways in which you use your platform. Listen, I have my whole life in ministry has been about service. And it may seem a bit unusual for folks to see a pastor running for the U.S. Senate, but it's not as large of a leap as it may seem. I've always felt that my service, my impact does not end at the church door. That's actually where it starts. And everything that we do in song and sermon on Sunday mornings, especially at a place like Ebenezer, the spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, all of the things that we say and testify about on Sunday, we've tried to make that come alive in the work. And so over the last 15 years, I've been registering voters. I've registered with Stacey Abrams and other partners, some 400,000 new voters in this state. I've stood up time and time again for access to healthcare because I believe that healthcare is a human right. And it is certainly something that the richest nation on the planet can and ought to provide to all of its citizens. I've stood up with workers time and time again saying that they deserve to share in some of the prosperity that they're creating, that they ought to share some of that. They that it's wrong to call people essential workers and not pay them an essential wage. And I've been someone who's tried to stand up for civil rights and human rights time and time again. I don't think that there's anything such thing as equal rights for some. And so I've stood with women. I've stood with members of the LGBTQ plus community. I've been fighting for environmental justice. I have stayed in what my parishioner John Lewis called good trouble. And what I'm hoping to do in this race is translate my years of activism and nonviolent creative agitation into legislation. My protests into public policy. I think people sitting around their kitchen tables are wondering, what does the conversation going on in Washington right now have to do with where they actually live?
Yeah, indeed. There are so many folks who are wondering why Congress can't come through in our time of need. And I know that you would have a very different approach in Washington. For those who don't understand why we're talking about a Senate race in December, there are 2 Senate races that are going to take place in Georgia on January 5th. And if Reverend Warnock and Jon Ossoff win their races, then Democrats will have the majority in the Senate. Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect, will become the tie-breaking vote. So getting behind this man and Jon Ossoff is the path to demote Mitch McConnell to the minority. Can you imagine that? I mean, that is such an immense opportunity. It's why I'm here in Georgia, and it's why I'm so thrilled to support the Reverend in this campaign. So we're here with a group of WNBA athletes. Your opponent is Kelly Loeffler, who is one of the owners, or maybe even the primary owner of the Atlanta WNBA team. And she took offense to the WNBA, and I presume the NBA's messaging that Black Lives Matter, that social justice concerns would be front and center, not just on the court, but on the jerseys of the players. Let's just say she's kind of like a solitary figure in that point of view among a lot of the folks in the community, and including a lot of the women athletes that play for her. So there's been some discussion that maybe she should not own this team if she's not that excited about some of the activist efforts. How do you feel that sports and athletes' personal politics plays into the way that sports and politics interact? Do you agree with the WNBA taking a stance around police brutality and police reform? And would you have a message for folks who think that athletes should just leave politics out of it?
Listen, let me just say how proud I am of the players who are on this call and so many who are not on this call. And I've gotten to know them a little better over the last few months. And they are to be commended and thanked for the ways in which they are using their voice. They refuse to be silenced, and they insist on being heard. They weren't making a political statement. When they came out in support of Black Lives Matter, ironically, it's really Kelly Loeffler who politicized sports, even as she said she didn't want politics in sports. They were making a social justice statement. And when you get engaged in social justice, yeah, you know, it has political implications, but it was a human rights statement about the fact that people deserve to feel safe in their own community. Recognizing the important work that law enforcement officers do, honoring it, but at the same time holding them accountable, the way in which everybody has to be held accountable. Law enforcement officers have to be held accountable. If they abuse their authority, senators ought to be held accountable. If they use their considerable authority to enrich themselves, as Kelly Loeffler has done, rather than standing up for the people that you're supposed to be representing. And so Sue and Nika and Angel and so many others are a part of a grand tradition of people who stand up trying to push us toward a more perfect union. The recognition that America is the greatest country on the planet, but we still have work to do, that we can get closer to the dream and the promise. And this summer, all of us saw, anybody who wanted to look, saw a tragic display of brutality that doesn't represent American values. As we saw this police officer's knee on the neck of George Floyd. And it awakened this country, maybe because we were all holed up in our homes amidst the COVID-19 challenge and people couldn't look away as they've done so often. And it shocked the country. And I think it was a moment, it was an inflection point. And thankfully, we saw a multiracial coalition of conscience pouring out into American streets in response to George Floyd, but not only him, in response to Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and so many others. And say, enough of these hashtags. And it was multiracial, multi-generational, saying we can be better than this. And it's unfortunate that Kelly Loeffler used it as an opportunity to try to make a cheap political point, you know, as an opportunity. And so she's playing with something that's a matter of life and death for other people. And to the credit of these players, they stood up in that moment. And they said, we're gonna be heard. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. And one of the proudest moments I've had was in this campaign was when I looked up one day and they were wearing these shirts that said "Vote Warnock."
Yes.
I know that it was much more than an endorsement of me, that it was an affirmation of the work that I've been trying to do. You know, I've been an activist my whole ministry. And every now and then, as I said, sometimes I get into good trouble. I don't, you know, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but if you really have a hunger and a thirst for change, you lay it on the line. And there have been times when I've participated in acts of civil disobedience to push us closer to the promise. And the first time I was arrested in an act of civil disobedience, I was a student, a seminary student in New York City in 1999, I believe it was. And a young African immigrant named Amadou Diallo was shot. They shot, I think, some 39 times, hit him 19 times, I believe it was, while he was reaching for his own wallet on his own front stoop. And I and throngs of other New Yorkers went to offer ourselves for arrest at One Police Plaza. That was the first time I stood up in an act of civil disobedience. That was in 1999. And I looked out my window in June and July of this year, and I saw a generation of young people who don't even remember Amadou Diallo. And they're young adults. That's 20 years ago and more, who don't remember Rodney King. They've heard us talk about it, but you know, I'm not sure the players on the call remember. I'm not sure they remember Rodney King. And here we are, a whole generation later.
We're old, Reverend. We're old.
Oh, we're old. And here we are. So here we are 20 years and more later. And you know what? Dr. King, in the speech that everybody likes to lift up, the I Have a Dream speech, do you know he mentions police brutality by name in that speech and says, people ask why won't we be satisfied? He said, we can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. He wasn't denigrating police officers or law enforcement. He was saying, we can be better than this. And we're not looking for special rights, just equal rights. And that's what my ministry has been about. And I want to take that passion and commitment, whether it's criminal justice reform or affordable health care, voting rights. I want to take those values to the United States Senate. That's right.
Amen. Let's get you there. And now we're going to bring in the players and Lisa to talk about how activism fits in with their platform as athletes. Reverend, such a pleasure. I'll be back. I think I'm closing it out. But for now, technology, whisk me away. Did that work?
You are so good, Andrew. Thank you so much. Let me bring in the players. We are so grateful to Andrew. Thank you very much. And Pastor, you stick close because the players are going to have a couple of questions for you. But let me start with a couple of introductions. I want to remind everybody that all these women are college graduates. The WNBA is the only professional league that requires that its players have 4 years post high school before they are eligible to be drafted. That's very unusual. These players also play half their time in the US, often half the other rest of the year in other parts of the world. So they are citizens of the world, but they play in the US 6 months out of the year. Let me start with Nneka Ogwumike, who is a forward for the Los Angeles Sparks. She was the first round draft pick in 2012. She's a WNBA champion. She's a 4-time All-Star, and she is president of the WNBPA, which is the Players Union. Welcome, Madam President. Then we have Sue Bird, and Sue is the GOAT, okay? Sue's been at this for a minute. She has got 4 WNBA championships, and Sue, don't you have 4 Olympic rings too? Kind of scary, girl. 4 Olympic rings. It's amazing. She was picked #1 by the Seattle Storm in 2002. And Sue, do you serve on the Executive Council or the Social Justice Council? Both?
The executive.
Executive. Okay, very good. And then we have Angel McCautry. Angel, it's a little dark where you are now. I think you are still in a car, but we appreciate you being here. Angel graduated from the University of Louisville, played her first 8 years here in Atlanta, now plays for the Las Vegas Aces. She's a 2-time Olympian as well. So this is a great group to represent the WNBA. There are 144 players, 12 teams, 12 players each. All of them are just like these beautiful women here. Let me start with Madam President. Madam President, Reverend Raphael Warnock here was just talking about social justice and how he got involved 21 years ago, nearly a generation. You guys have something new called the Social Justice Council. Can you talk about that, you and your sisters, why you started it and what it means?
Yeah, sure. First, thank you so much for having me on here. I think it's interesting because in these times, although, quite challenging, I've had the opportunity to hop on panels and discussions with people that I feel like I probably wouldn't have ordinarily met. And so it's an honor, obviously, to be on here with, my constituents in the W, of course, Miss Lisa Borders, and then obviously Raphael Warnock and of course, Mr. Andrew Yang. So I want to thank everyone for my time, for just the opportunity, but to speak to, kind of our vision for this season. And I say that delicately because, a lot of what we have done as a league and as women in the WNBA and women in sport, it's been ingrained in us. We've had experience with stepping out and speaking on behalf of our fans, on behalf of communities that we represent, and of course, communities that we hope to impact. I think that Reverend Warnock said it best, these are human rights. And I find it interesting that activism is necessary for equality for everyone, because I feel as though it should be ingrained. And I think that we wanted to be well equipped this summer with our vision to amplify our voices on behalf of women, mostly, of course, women of color, but of everyone of color who has been marginalized and so negatively affected by the violence that we experience in this country that's been ingrained through police brutality. And so we were able to establish a social justice council, of which was led by our first vice president, Lasia Clarendon, in conjunction with the WNBA, for us to truly have the vehicle we needed to mobilize and organize, as we so successfully did. I'll brag about that this summer, because that was probably the highlight of this summer, what we were able to do. And I tell everyone that the highlight for me was definitely walking in with those Warnock shirts and seeing the impact that it had. It was really fun to be able to do that.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Nneka. And Sue Bird, UConn in the house. So many UConn players in the league. Here's the thing. The WNBA was started in 1996. In 2016, everybody was really beginning to start reeling over all the racial stuff that was going on at that point. And before Colin Kaepernick took a knee, the WNBA teams were taking a stand in 2016. I remember that well. Can you talk about why it was important for you all to become civically engaged in 2016 as teams? And today?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is pretty simple. You know, as female athletes, our lives are, like the Reverend said, it's based around social justice, which kind of turns into a little bit of politics now and then. We're a group that is marginalized, stereotyped. We've had to fight for everything we've earned. And, you know, I sometimes joke that, like so many others, we would love to be judged based on our performance. But sadly, that's just not the world we live in, you know, but this is our lives on the court, and it's also our lives off the court. So when you consider the makeup of our league, obviously women, 100%, but a high percentage of Black women, the presence of the LGBTQ community, it makes sense. You know, sadly, again, it makes sense. And it all makes sense as to why our lives are political. And we're used to the fight. So when it comes time to fight that fight publicly and to fight that fight for others, we're not just willing. I think as a group, we're ready because we're so familiar with it. And we truly want to have an impact on our communities, similar to what Nneka said. You know, having that impact on our communities is just so important. And again, we're just so used to it. We're ready to stand up when needed.
Well, I'm super proud of you, as you well know, all of you. I get so excited when I saw you on TV with those Warnock shirts, I almost fell out of my chair, and I absolutely loved it. But Nneka, talk about why did you guys get so animated around politics in this particular case? You guys often talked about what was going on in the news, but this was a whole nother level of engagement. So what got the league, you individually, the teams, the entire league animated around politics this time?
Well, I think like on an individual level, you know, as citizens, not just as players with platforms, a lot of people have been in tune with politics, especially the last 4 years. And I think that with everything swirling around,
I think we lost Nneka for a second.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you, but we lost you for the last like 15 seconds. You know what? I'm going to come back to Nneka. Sue, you can hear me, right? Oh,
Sorry
now
about that.
that's
Can you guys
okay.
hear me? Okay, cool.
Go ahead, Nneka. You want to finish your answer?
Yeah. I was just saying that we all felt incredibly compelled with what's been going on in our world to be more engaged. And what better way than to establish a social justice council and also kind of organize, as we had kind of practice in negotiating a CBA, to understand how we needed to educate ourselves around civic engagement. And outside of just us using our platforms to engage politically, you know, we were also, you know, involved in politics without our asking. and at the same time, we were incredibly informed through many conversations with incredibly phenomenal people who are experts in their own fields, for us to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. And we were able, everything that we were putting out there, we were also learning about in our own rights. We were able to register to vote, fill out the census, and circulate that type of information that allowed us to be authentic in our engagement and how we used our platforms.
Excellent. Sue, can you talk about the vetting process that you guys went through for Reverend Warnock? It's one thing to see politics on TV and hear it and follow it on your phone. It's quite another to step out and endorse a candidate. So talk a little bit about how you guys decided to do that and what process you went through for the general, and obviously you're supporting him through the runoff. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, what a wild ride. You know, we didn't really, you know, like Nneka said, it was like all of a sudden we were kind of in this political world we weren't used to. But given what we went through with, and this is actually gonna be the first time I say her name in a long time, Senator Loeffler, you know, especially the players on the Atlanta Dream and then the other players in our league who reside in Georgia, it was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. It was tough to have an owner not support the fact that Black Lives Matter when, like I said earlier, you know, our I think it's like 75, 80% of our league is Black. So at first we had this like knee-jerk reaction of sorts, just like an emotional, like I said, reaction. And we quickly realized that we couldn't necessarily force her out of our league, but we also knew this wasn't the type of person we would want in the Senate. And that's really what led us to Reverend Warnock. And I got to say, it's rare in life where all the stars align. And that's really what happened on so many levels. You know, we kind of did our own little vetting, like got Googling, if you will. Like I was on there Googling, reading some stuff. And quickly we found that Stacey Abrams, who is on our advisory board, had already endorsed Reverend Warnock. We found you again, Lisa. And for those that don't know, Lisa was the president, so we know her of our league very well. And so right away, it was like, check mark, check mark, check mark. Okay. But, you know, so we knew he was a good guy, obviously. But we still wanted to get to know him on a deeper level before we had 144 players back him. And that's when he was kind enough to get on a Zoom call with us. And it's actually kind of funny looking back on it, because in his introduction, he spoke about healthcare. He spoke about LGBTQ issues, criminal justice reform, being pro-choice, and of course, his support and how proud he was with our work with Say Her Name, and just overall, you know, wanting Black lives to matter. So he was so good in his intro that we actually didn't have that many questions. Like he kind of just like hit it out the park. And the rest of the Zoom was spent with him and his team guiding us. You know, like I said, we're not political strategists. So it was really Reverend Warnock that advised us to not use her name. That taught us it would only, you know, give that name power. And instead, we should continue to focus on what we're already doing, right? Promoting the things that we found to be most important. So what I'll always take away from that vetting process and those Zoom calls was the way in which Reverend Warnock, who was fighting his own fight and trying to get into the Senate, was so willing and eager to help us fight our fight. And I think that's the type of person that you want to support. And that's why we wanted to support him the way we did. Because you know he's a guy who's gonna meet this moment. He did for us, and I'm sure he'll do it for Georgians all around.
Yeah, Reverend Warnock, you didn't know you passed your interview with flying colors, did you?
No, I did not. And it warms my heart to hear that from the great Sue Bird. And look, this work is so important, and it's wonderful just to see the ways in which these sisters are standing up and using their platform in such a powerful way.
Yeah, let me ask Angel one last question, then I'm gonna turn it over to the players. So Angel, you played in Atlanta for 8 years, the first 8 years of your career, and you actually know Reverend Warnock's opponent. Can you talk just a minute about why he would be the best representative of Atlanta and the full state of Georgia in the US Senate, as opposed to his opponent? Give us the Atlanta perspective.
Absolutely. Well, first, let me say thank you for having me on here. Excuse me for being in the car. I have to actually speak to some kids, socially distancing a few. But when I got the call to come on, I couldn't turn it up. But I just want to say, yeah, I've known Kelly for a long time. You know, being with Atlanta Dream. So I got to know her really well. But as soon as she got in politics, there was definitely a change in her character and things like that. And I understand if you have to be political, be political. But I think when it comes to human rights, as Reverend Warnock said, politics and human rights are two totally different things. You know what I mean? So, and of course, I've known Reverend Warnock from being here and being at Ebenezer Church. I always knew what he stood for. So, of course, when you were comparing the two to see what the values were in each one, Reverend Warnock is the one who stood for the people with healthcare, the things that even Sue Bird said. And of course, shout out to Sue Bird and the committee for putting together the shirts, for endorsing Reverend Warnock. But when you just compare the two and what they believed in, it was just a no-brainer that Reverend Warnock was for the people. And just the things that Kelly has said and done, it was shocking to see. And it was things that me personally, I couldn't support.
Yeah, thank you for that, Angel. So appreciate it. Nneka and Sue, I know you had a couple of questions for the pastor, so I'm gonna let you go for it. Nneka, you start. Angel, you go do your thing with the kids.
Bye, Angel.
Thanks, Angel. Great work.
So we've obviously had conversations with you, Reverend Warnock, and I think you, like Sue said, you do such an excellent job of guiding and educating. And, you know, in this moment now, it's crazy to see that we're in this moment now. Because in my adult life, this is the first time I'm truly learning about a runoff. And so we want to know, as athletes, you know, with platforms, or even just citizens anywhere who want to support this campaign, like, what can we do from afar? I got advice on a Zoom a couple weeks ago about it's not a good idea for everyone to just go to Georgia, obviously. So we want to know what you think we can do to, you know, continue the fight.
Thank you, and I'll answer your question, but let me just pause, because sometimes great things are happening, and I want to make sure we don't miss it. And I mean everybody who's watching right now. You know, we just, when you decide to step up and to stand up, you just never really know the impact that you may have in that moment, or maybe that moment leads to another moment. And you all decided to stand up for a Senate candidate, pastor of a church. You didn't really know. How we could not have known a few months ago that when the dust settled on November 3rd, there'd be 2 runoffs. Both of them would be in Georgia. And one of those runoffs would be a Senate candidate that the whole league stood up and supported. I don't know if that's ever happened in sports history. Somebody will look that up. I don't know that a sports league has ever stood up and supported a candidate.
No, Pastor,
But
this
there
is
was
a
no
first.
way.
They have already made history, and we're going to make it a second
Yeah,
time when you get elected. I just put that in the universe. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. Absolutely. But, you know, there was no way for you to know just how consequential this particular race was going to be. Now the whole country is watching, and we got these 2 Senate races going on in Georgia, and you're very much a part of it. And so I just want to flag that for somebody who's thinking about stepping up and standing up. That's the pastor in me. I want to encourage you to step up, because you don't know the ripple effect that your voice can have. And so in this moment, listen, our democracy is on the line. There are clearly folk who just don't seem to respect American values, the rule of law, equal protection under the law, the nonviolent and unchaotic transfer of power, the ways in which we can all, you know, push us toward a more perfect union. And so I want to encourage people to go to my website, warnock4georgia.com. That's everything spelled out, no abbreviations, nothing cute, warnock4georgia.com. And you don't have to leave your state, wherever you are, to volunteer and to support what we're doing in Georgia. You click on the link that says volunteer. We've got an army of digital volunteers, certainly all across the state, but all across the country. People who are engaged and who understand what's at stake. Certainly you can give, and no amount is too small. And please contribute to the campaign. I'm running alongside John Ossoff. I'm proud of him as well. His website is electjon.com. Support us in this work. You can volunteer from right where you are. And if you know people in Georgia, tell them to vote. Vote like their life depends on it. We learned tragically this year that it does. That we say elections have consequences. As we've watched over 260,000 Americans lose their lives, most of whom unnecessarily, we see that elections are really a matter of life and death. Early voting begins on December 14th. Tell your friends in Georgia. And you can start voting by mail right now. And if you didn't even vote on November 3rd, don't go into a corner somewhere and feel ashamed that you didn't vote. If you live in Georgia, guess what? You get one more time to get it right. Maybe you weren't 18 on November 3rd, but you're 18 now. You'll be 18 by January 5th. Guess what? You can register to vote. The deadline for that is December 7th. If young people will stand up in this moment in ways that people don't expect, because they're always ready to count out young folks, if the young people in Georgia stand up, and other folks who are justice loving people will stand up, we're going to make history in Georgia. We've already flipped the state blue. We're going to win these 2 Senate seats, and we're going to give Joe Biden and Kamala Harris what they need so that we can get COVID relief, make sure people have health care, and support workers and families all across this state.
Good job. Sue, jump in here. I know you had one last question.
Yeah, sure. It's a piggyback off NECA. Obviously we all want to help from afar, and one way to do that is on social media. So what
Yep.
is the best message to share on social media?
Just tell folks that, the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr., is running for the U.S. Senate. Person who grew up in public housing, one of 12 children in my family, of number 11, the first college graduate. I'm running because I know the difference that Pell Grants make in low interest student loans, good federal public policy. I'm a Head Start alum, where you work with who are under 5 and make sure that word gap that we talk about is decreased, because you're engaging their little minds. And they grow up, you never know what they become. I know the difference that public policy connected with people's own sense of grit, hard work, and determination, the difference that makes. And so just use your platforms. Listen, we're getting a lot of love and appreciation for our ads, by the way. And maybe if my team is on, you can put the ads in the chat. And with the platforms that you all have, maybe if you share some of the ads the other day, some of the ads that you have. I'm excited about all that's going on. But and I looked up the other day, and Lisa Carey Washington had retweeted my ad and said, "Vote for the Rev." I said, "I have arrived." No, but seriously, whatever platforms that you have, helping us get that message out will be incredibly important.
Thank you so much. You guys have been great. NECA and Sue, thank you so much. I'm going to let you guys slip out. Rev, I'm going to let you slip out too. I'm going to invite everybody that's still watching with us. We have 3 quick videos from several players who could not be live today, but they are across the globe and wanted to send their words of support for Reverend Warnock. So the first one will be Natalie Achanwa, who is a Canadian player, and she is fabulous. She graduated from Notre Dame and plays for the Indiana Fever. Then we will have Brianna Stewart, who is also a teammate to Sue Bird. And Brianna is a 2-time WNBA champion, and she's an Olympian from 2016. She's a bad girl. She too is sending words of encouragement. And last but not least, we have Elizabeth Williams, who plays center for the Atlanta Dream. She's a Duke graduate. She wants to share a couple of words, and then I'm going to come back and close us out. Roll the video, please.
Hi, I'm Brianna Stewart, and I'm proud to join you today in support of Reverend Warnock, the Democratic nominee in the U.S. Senate special election who will fight for the health and well-being of all Georgians. When I first met Reverend Warnock, it was this summer during our WNBA season, and just like us as players, he was trying to continue to be on the right side of history and continue to make our country and our world a better place. He's someone who believes in criminal justice reform, environmental justice, voting rights, and Medicaid expansion. And I think that, my message is, even though I'm not registered to vote in the state of Georgia, this election is something that's super, super important. And I want to continue to use my platform and, help educate people on Reverend Warnock. So I hope to all the Georgians, I hope you are registered to vote. I hope you're ready for this runoff that's happening, and I hope that you're getting ready to continue to make your state better. And for those of you that don't know, this is a super important election because we have the opportunity to flip the Senate if Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff are able to win.
Thanks so much to Stewie. Now let's tee up Natalie and then Elizabeth, and we're going to call it a wrap. So here's what we're going to do. We're obviously having some technical challenges, but let me just say that both Natalie and Elizabeth send their strongest wishes for us to make sure that particularly those of us in Georgia make a plan to vote. This is all about turnout, getting folks to come back to the polls. It wasn't enough to vote for the folks at the top of the ticket, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We really need to offer them, give them a Senate that they can work with to help get their legislation through and the agenda that all of us are so interested in. So let me just lift my voice to share on their behalf that this is an incredibly important time. Getting out the vote is the most important thing that we could possibly do. Early voting starts in Georgia on December the 14th. You can vote anywhere. You must demonstrate who you are by your driver's license or a passport or some government issued ID. But for those who want to vote early and avoid any line, you can vote starting on December the 14th. Many of us have already requested an absentee ballot. I understand that number is almost at 1 million people in the state. So if you have requested one, thank you so much. If you have not, please request one if you would like to vote through this method. But I would invite you to drop off that absentee ballot. Don't drop it in the mail. Let's make sure that you look to drop your ballot off in a drop box so that it absolutely gets counted. And finally, the big day is on January the 5th, 2021, and we want to make sure that Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff are elected to the U.S. Senate, which will give the Democrats control of the Senate and a great support lever to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, let me not forget that we must mention money. Let me thank you all again. Those who are listening, we're streaming this live. Thank you so much for the contributions that have come in already. If you haven't made a contribution, we have put in the chat where you can make a contribution to Raphael Warnock. Please feel free to go to that website and make your contribution. No amount is too small. Every dollar counts. These are some very expensive races. Both candidates are up on TV. Raphael Warnock is the guy that we are talking about tonight. He is the man. Again, let me thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. I want to thank Reverend Warnock for stepping up and being willing to run for public office. This is no joke. It is hard work. Let me thank my co-host, Andrew Yang, and certainly all of our players, Nneka Ogumake, Sue Burr, Angel McCautry, who were here with us live, but also Natalie Achanwa, Brianna Stewart, and Elizabeth Williams. Thank you so much. Stay safe and God bless. Take good care.